Hey, everybody. Welcome to another incredible episode with Ghost Hunting Beauties for our paranormal podcast. And today we have an extra special guest. We have Bill Bean, who is a spiritual deliverance minister and world-renowned exorcist. He's got over 30 years of experience and works in 55 countries. He is worldwide. He is famous. He's been on all the ghost shows. And we had the chance to ask him some of the questions that you might have. So stay tuned. Incredible guest. We have Bill Bean, who is known as the spiritual warrior, and he is a world-known exorcist. He has incredible accounts. He's got books. He's been on all of the ghost shows. And welcome, Bill Bean. We are so happy to have you with us today.
Thank you so much, Angela. It's great to be here.
Well, you have been all over TV. I have seen you've been on the Holzer Files. I mean, you've been with Jack Osborne. You've been with the greats. And here you are with me. So I feel very blessed that you were able to make time for us today.
Well, you're the greatest. So praise God for that.
And I know.
And so, yeah, it's been a journey for sure. And
Right.
We talked off air before this. It's just really like a blur to me, to be honest with you.
Oh, I can imagine, especially the things that you've seen. Like you have had so many years experience with the paranormal since you were young.
Yeah. 5 years old. Looking back on that, where I'm at now, I'm so far removed from those things. It's almost like it happened to somebody else. And it's just,
Wow.
My whole story is just a miracle. And I can never thank God and praise God enough for saving me and then for transforming my life from victim to victor.
Exactly. So most people, I'm sure, they have the ones who haven't read your book yet, which they need to read your books, because I only got to read one so far, but I know you've got 11 out and working on another one very soon.
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about your experience of what led you to be a spiritual warrior, because that takes a lot of guts.
Well, I was a spiritual victim at first. And before I go any further, I want to thank you for taking the time to read that book and to do the research into me that you have. I appreciate that.
100%.
So you've done your homework, and I really appreciate that. My life started out as being a victim. There are photographs of me at one was in 1968 at age 2. My sister and I were seated behind a toy piano. It was Christmas time, 1968. And she was seated to my left. I was 2, she was 11. And to her far left appeared, and this is a black and white photo, appearing in the photo, looked to be a very large being, at least 7 feet tall, with a long black hooded cape or cloak or whatever you want to call it.
Oh my
That was
gosh.
1968. And then the following year, 1969, my dad had taken a photograph of me at age 3. And this should have been it was a Polaroid photo, and it should have been a Polaroid photo of a little boy standing in front of the bushes. And it was as if a dimensional doorway had opened at that very moment, because it was a 3-year-old boy with many different types of life forms and beings in the photograph.
Right.
Lined up behind me in single file were 3 humanoid-looking beings. Standing above them and back of me was a very tall lion-looking, and it had the face of a lion, over top of me. That to my left appeared to be what looked like a little gray alien, and to the left of that looked to be the face of a Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Sabe creature. Say
Right.
that fast 3 times. And there were other entities as well. Again, it was as if this dimensional doorway had opened, and all these many different types of entities had manifested. So, like you said, I've written 11 books, and the first book is called Dark Force. And in Dark Force, I say that it all began in 1970 when my family and I moved into this 3-bedroom ranch-style home located in Glen Burnie, Maryland, in a community called Herondale. But
Right.
as I've just described, it goes much further back than that. And after I'd
Really?
written the book, I discovered that over 100 years ago, two family members had actually conjured up demonic forces through ritual,
Oh,
invitation, invocation. And that's where it really started.
that's
And
no good.
when people are doing those kinds of things, it will be like a spiritual virus that is unleashed on the family bloodline curse type of thing.
Right.
And that's what was happening. So I very much believe that my parents were led to that house where evil was already present and manifest in that home and
Oh,
in that area as
yeah.
well. And couple that with the evil that we already had on the family due to the
Mhm.
conjuring of those demonic forces, and we were involved in the perfect storm of evil, surrounded by evil, and my family was destroyed by demonic forces, and I nearly was as well. So the
Right.
house sat at the bottom of a downhill cul-de-sac, and it had a very long and deep ravine behind it that stretched for several miles. And the whole area was steeped in paranormal, supernatural activity and events. Um, and in later years, I would find out how much because I had returned to the area between the years of 2014 and 2016
Right.
to go to several of those houses in the area that were having demonic problems. So God had worked through me to evict demonic forces away from families that were suffering that were in that very area where I'd lived. So again, the house
Right.
had a very ominous look and feel about it, and it's at the bottom of this downhill cul-de-sac. It was in disrepair. My father, William Bean Sr., was a master carpenter, and he saw it as a restoration project, which he did. He restored
Right.
it to look very nice. Um, but I knew from the very beginning, my sister did as well. So, I'm 4, she is 13, and we're standing there, and we both just had this awful feeling. And that was before even walking in there. And then when
Oh,
went inside, it was equally as ominous and foreboding in there. It was very, very dark. You could
right.
feel the presence of evil through a variety of ways. And there's atmospheric changes and pressures that take place,
Oh,
along
really?
with, horrible smells,
Oh,
smell of
yeah.
feces or sulfur, or something that's rotted.
I was gonna
Um,
say the sulfuric smell is something that's very dark. Something,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And so all those things were present and manifest. And the house was very, very dark as well. The the walls were dark brown. It's like a dark brown paneling.
Hmm.
And the house was always very dark, even on the brightest of days. The house was very, very dark inside. And so
And
you
that's a
would go
sign right
in.
there.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so you would go in through the front door and you were facing a coat closet that had like two wooden doors that were on sliders.
Oh, I
And
remember those kind of doors.
yes, and you would go into the living room, and then you would, if you went straight ahead, you would go into a dining room, and the back door was there, and you would make a right into this small galley type of kitchen. If you dividing the living room between the dining room was a semi half, I guess, half length bookcase, and a side to the left side of that. Well, if you were in the living room, I guess it would be the right. You
Right.
would go down this long hallway, which had a hard tile floor. And my brother and I shared the first room on the right. My parents' room was the second room on the right. My sister's room was the room across the hall, the last room on the left. And that is the room where I believe that the main portal was. I believe that the main portal in that house was in her closet, and it was adjacent to the linen closet at the end of the hallway.
You said because her
Um,
room was colder, right? There was like colder spots
Always.
in her room.
Yes, that room. And that's also the room where the door would open and slam for many repetitions at a time.
Oh, wow. That had to
And
be
we,
terrifying as a kid.
oh, absolutely. And not only that, when these types of things are happening, and so it started out as my mom, Patricia Bean,
Hmm.
was a homemaker. She was the first one to have an experience in the house. And this happened while she was unpacking and organizing. And my dad had taken us, I have an older sister and a younger brother. He had
Hmm.
taken us with him for the day to allow my mother to be able to do this without us bothering her. And it was during the course of that she felt a presence come into the room. And she spun around, fully anticipating on seeing my father, because her thoughts were that he was playing a joke on her.
Right, sneaking
and
up
trying
behind
to scare her.
her.
Yeah. And she spun around, fully anticipating on seeing him, and to her shock, nothing or no one was there.
Terrible feeling. Terrible.
Yeah, and so she was taken aback by it, unnerved by it. But after collecting herself, she was able to go back to doing what she was doing. And then my sister's bedroom door slammed shut by itself, and that was enough to make her go outside and wait until we returned. So that's where it began. And then it gradually escalated into these other noises. And there were times that you would hear tapping on the walls as if someone was taking a finger and flicking it on the paneled walls. And then there were times it sounded like someone was taking a fist and hitting the walls. And so it was things like that, TVs turning on. And back then, you didn't have any remote controls. We had a big console TV, and you had to press a button in, and then you had the big heavy dial that you had to turn manually. And so something would press that button in and flip those channels that dial effortlessly. That happened many, many times. So it was a series of these types of events that gradually led to physical attacks on us from these entities. And again, it greatly contributed to the destruction of my family and nearly destroyed me as well.
Right. And so that led you to this path you're on now to help other people, because you've been through it.
Yes. And really a turning point for me, or I'll say the biggest test of my life at that point in time, came at age 13 in 1979. Now, by that time, by 1975, my dad had left us. Thank God he left, because had he stayed, he probably would have killed my mother. He began to spiral out of control. He was the first one that came under major attack, and I understand why, because he was the strong one. They wanted him out of there. And so my dad
was targeted him.
Yes, he was a very good man who made some terrible choices in life. And so one of the bad choices he made, and I think this was because he didn't know how to cope with this. My parents believed in God, but we didn't have any faith-based background. We didn't go to church. We weren't baptized, nothing like that. They were social drinkers. Back then, you would have house parties where there was drinking and smoking and all that kind of stuff. But then, not long after moving into the house, his drinking started escalating to the point to where he became a raging alcoholic who began to physically abuse my mother on a regular basis between it was horrific. Between 1973 and 1975, and he nearly killed her on several occasions. I can recall being, when I was 8 years old, having to run out of the house to get the police call on my father because he was killing my mother.
Terrible.
There was a lot of bloodletting in that house, and I have no doubt, based on what I witnessed, that while under the influence of alcohol, these demonic entities were able to manifest and direct my father's rage, towards my mother. And that is where the spirit of Al-Kul comes in. So for those that are, and look, I'm not talking about a person that goes out to dinner and has a glass of wine or whatever. I'm talking about a person that is hammering them down, whatever it is, one after the other. And when you get into that territory of being under the influence, now you're under the spirit of Al-Kul, which is a demonic entity that can come and literally take over and create. How many times have you heard a person that was under the influence say, I did that, I said that, I don't remember that? It's because they were unplugged. It's like their mind was unplugged and this external force was plugged in. And now anything can happen because you have another force driving that body. And so I believe that's what was taking place in my father's case. I'm not making excuses for him. And he made horrific choices. And believe me, I hated him for many, many years. I'm thankful that I was able to forgive him before his untimely death. It's a terrible, terrible, horrible thing when a person makes those choices and then they come under that spirit and his whole life just crumbled. and our lives along with him crumbled. And,
Right.
so you have that dynamic along with the supernatural infiltration that has now taken place in the home, on the family. So he leaves in 1975. My mother comes under regular physical attack from these demonic entities between the years of 1975 and 1981, up until the time of her untimely death at
So
age
getting worse
44.
even after he left.
Yes. And so she never got a break. And Angela, I have been involved in thousands of cases throughout my career, helping people all over America and nearly 60 other countries as well. And I've seen a lot of suffering. And I have to tell you, I have yet to see a person suffer to the level of what my poor mother suffered for all of those years. I wouldn't wish that on anybody. So she
No.
truly suffered horribly in many ways. And to further the point, not only was she being physically abused by my dad and then those demonic entities, she was also very ill. She had been diagnosed with high blood pressure, which led to a series of strokes, which ultimately led to kidney failure. And then she died at age 44 from a cerebral hemorrhage. So she suffered greatly. And so when these, thank you, I appreciate your kind words. But when people, and this is what people don't understand as well. We talked about this off air. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean that it's not there. So, yes, we see that demons can physically harm and attack and possess people. Yes. But there's another aspect to this as well. And this is part of what I call demonic stronghold and demonic oppression, to where these entities behind the scenes are pressing these buttons to cause stress, anxiety, worry, depression, and all these negative confusion, all these things on a person, and it is designed to wear them down. It is a wear down tactic. So this comes out of the devil's playbook. He's got a playbook, and he uses these tactics, his bully tactics, divide and conquer tactics. And this is why in the spiritual, supernatural phenomena, some people, whether it's demonic entities or some people would say ghost or whatever, these things are designed to put that person, in fear. Fear is the number one ingredient for the devil to come in and create a variety of problems, and then confusion. And when a person cannot think clearly and they're in a state of fear, well, the devil's got you right where he wants you.
Oh, yeah.
And so all life operates on frequency and vibration. And why do I say that? I say that because I believe that God, Yahweh is his name, spoke the world into existence. And if he did so, well, then he did so by the frequency and vibration of his voice. Therefore, all life operates on that principle. So if we are on high frequency and high vibration, life is good, life is positive, we're moving forward. It's never perfect. We live in a sin-filled, fallen world, so we'll never be perfect, but we must strive for excellence every single day. And if we could do that, then we're keeping our frequency and vibration on high. But if we're on low, and believe me, I've been there, life sucks. It's hellish. It's like the black cloud is over a person's head. Nothing ever goes right. There's always a problem, a situation, an issue, a drama, and never an answer.
And we all know people like that. We've all met people like that they just can't seem to get out of their vicious circle. And, a lot of times we're doing it to ourselves, unfortunately, even though we want to point our fingers everywhere else. But being in that influence, if you're not on the higher vibration or frequency, you're not living your best life. You're not likely to get out of it without help or someone else to pull you out.
No, it's going to snowball. It's going to snowball into more bad things, because that becomes a spiritual stronghold. So that's a demonic stronghold, which leads to demonic oppression, which is part of the end game. So bringing it to the end game, which is a full demonic possession, the devil has to wear that person down. So it has to be one terrible thing after another, after another, to wear the person down to the point to where they give up. They give up the will to fight. They give up the will to live. And that's how a full demonic possession could take place. So it is all, so in part, when you see these little, I call them parlor tricks, with some of the things that I described, with tapping or rapping on the walls, objects floating or being moved or disappearing. These are all little parlor tricks, and they do this to put the person in fear. Therefore, it's lowered the frequency and vibration, and then the attack can begin.
Right. That's one thing I was going to ask you is that what do they do to continue? Because I know that demons are about trickery. From one thing I've learned, It's all about trickery. And if they can make you scared, it's like they've got you. That's the one thing. They know they've got you when you're scared.
It's trickery and deception. And so when you have something lurking in the shadows that is plotting against you, that's absolutely evil. And they're doing it to wear the person down to the point to where they can eventually take over that person because the person has given up the will to live and the will to fight. Therefore, now they have a host body that they can work through to create a variety of damage.
Right. That was going to be my next question is, so when these people they're at their lowest and they suffer from demonic possession, what is the goal of these demons or these entities to be able to take over a person's body? What is their ultimate goal?
To kill, rob, and destroy. And that's exactly what they do. And so I can't tell you the exact number of cases that I've been involved in, but it's in the thousands now.
Wow. That's a lot.
I've seen, it is a lot. And this is a body of work that is supernatural in itself. There is no possible way, Angela, that me as a human being, a flesh and blood man, could maintain the schedule that I do, and to have been in the situations that I have, many life-threatening situations, the amount of travel, the sleeplessness, I've gone like 48 hours without sleep and still, traveling across country and then coming back and going out for another. These are supernatural things. If it were my own accord, I'd have had a heart attack or stroke a long time ago.
Right.
These are supernatural things. I get to bed between 6:30 a.m. and 7 a.m. every morning. Every morning. That's when I go to bed.
Oh, my gosh.
If I'm not traveling, I'm doing sessions with people via phone or Skype. And I could be having a session with somebody in Australia or New Zealand or somewhere around the world. Africa, I just recently had a session with someone in Zambia.
Wow.
This is a phenomena in itself. You have all these time differences, so I could be 5 or 6 in the morning on a Skype session performing a spiritual deliverance for somebody, and one of those places that might have a 16 and a half hour time difference.
Wow, that's incredible. That's why you're a spiritual warrior.
Well,
that's why you're a warrior.
For it. Yeah, thank you, and I praise God for it because I could not do this of my own accord. And if you look in the Bible, there's mention of the 7 sons of Sheba that went on their own accord. And they wanted to go and cast demons out, and they got ripped to shreds because they went on their own accord and not by the authority of God. And so everything that I do is by the power and authority of God. By His calling and His favor and His mercy, He has kept me safe. I have had guns pulled on me, knives. I disarmed a gunman many years ago after he'd fired 2 shots. I've had people try to stab me, slice me, bite me, physically attack me, spit on me. And before I was a spiritual warrior, I spent nearly 25 years in the bar and nightclub business as a bouncer, director of security, manager of securities. So I was in many life-threatening situations in that life. Wow. And that is sort of carried over from physical warrior to spiritual warrior. And I've been in many of those, again, as a spiritual warrior. I've had people come up to me and say, I want to shoot you right now. Here, take my gun before I shoot you. Things of that nature. Yeah, you just wouldn't believe it. You would not believe it.
People that haven't met you, they just walk up to you and say that.
Well, no, not walk up to me. I've gone into their houses to perform exorcism or spiritual deliverance, and all of a sudden they're walking up to me, handing me their gun, saying, I want to shoot you right now. I had, in one exorcism, I had a young man named Caleb Weaver. His story was featured in Discovery, and all the other channels have featured my stories, not only my story, but my case files, many of my case files.
Right.
And Caleb's story, and I thank New Dominion Pictures and some of the other production companies for putting it out there. But the Caleb Weaver story was featured on A Haunting, and it was featured on I Was Possessed. That I Was Possessed series aired on Lifetime Movie Network. And I was supposed to star in a spin-off series to that, which was going to be called The Exorcist Files, but Lifetime pulled the plug on the project in the 11th hour. because they said it was too disturbing for their viewing
Really?
audience. Yeah.
With
Lifetime's
all
more
that
of
you
a
see
chick
on Netflix
flick.
now, what could be more disturbing?
Yeah, well, back in that time, Lifetime was more of a chick flick type of
Right,
station.
true.
And so I guess they felt that it was too disturbing. So that, but that was the end of that as far as the series
Right.
that I was supposed. But I was in several episodes of that I Was Possessed series, and they featured some of my case files in there.
That's
And
really neat.
Caleb was completely possessed.
Oh,
And
no.
before I went over to perform that exorcism, God put a picture in my head that Caleb was going to try and stab me. And
Oh, my goodness. So you had
yeah,
a
and I
warning
take that seriously. When God's putting that in my head, I take it seriously.
for sure.
So what we did is I actually put him in handcuffs, and in behind his arms were cuffed behind a chair. Caleb was a police officer, a special police officer, and I took his own handcuffs and cuffed him to his chair, behind his chair. And when I was performing the exorcism over him, I used a combination of holy water, holy oil, holy salt, and frankincense, all mixed together.
Interesting.
And so I was applying that to his head, and some of that dripped down. And he spit it back on me.
Oh,
And then he had this maniacal laugh, and his eyes had turned black. I mean, he was absolutely fully
gosh.
possessed. So then he put his head down, and I grabbed him. I grabbed his hair and literally pulled his head up to where his eyes met mine. And when that happened, he got this anguished look on his face, and his head went all the way back, and it was
Ooh.
facing the ceiling. And then all this black stuff started coming out of his mouth. I will
wow.
never, ever forget that. And he was delivered from it right there and then. Then I baptized him after that. And many of these,
Thank goodness.
in many of these exorcisms, I baptize the victim after that. Even if the person's already been baptized, that doesn't matter, because, you know, you're delivered from evil and now your temple is cleansed. And
Right.
my opinion is that the final exclamation point on that is for the person to be blessed, sealed, sanctified, purified, cleansed, made holy, and baptized before God. And then that is it. That's the final blessing and purification of it.
Yes. Cleanse the palate and restart fresh and make sure
Yeah.
that they're protected, because, I mean, these things can come back, correct?
And when they do come back, 7 more than the original, 7 more wicked than the original can return.
Ooh.
So, and I have been back to some of my clients over the years. Some I've been back to as many as 5 times because
Whoa.
they would not close the door. And look, I give the people, I'm not just somebody walking in, performing exorcism and spiritual deliverance, and then I just ride off into the sunset.
Exactly.
I'm every bit as much a counselor as I am a spiritual warrior. I have to sit down with the person before, because I have to get all the info. I don't want to know people's deep and dark secrets. I have to know. We have to get to the root of the problem in order to purge these things. And then after everything's over with, and after I've performed the exorcism, spiritual deliverance over a person, I have to sit down with them again and put a game plan together for their life and moving forward.
Definitely. Otherwise,
that-
it's coming back.
Correct. And that involves some do's and don'ts. And so we have to keep those doors closed that opened and allowed the devil to send those demons in the first place. And some people don't do that. And I have been back to some of those types 4 and 5 times.
What are some of those do's and don'ts, if you can share them with us? Because, I mean, it's really good for people that might be listening to understand of what would be leading a life to try to not go towards that direction or become susceptible to demonic possession.
Yeah, well, there's an old saying, curiosity killed the cat. So you got to be very, very careful. I have a lot of friends in the paranormal field, and I love everybody. I'm not against anybody, but I caution people not to do those things, because you wouldn't believe the amount of people that have come to me for help in that field, and the amount of people that are on some of them big shows that have come to me for help as well.
I can imagine.
You're opening the door to the unknown, and in essence giving the devil a legal right to send demons in because of the curiosity, because of some people do it for thrills. Some people do it because they want 15 minutes of fame, that they want to be on one of these paranormal shows or whatever. There are people out there that do it because they love people and they care about people, and they want to try and be a help to a person or a family, and I commend that. But for
100%.
those that are doing it for themselves and for their own selfish motivations or motives,
Right.
because they want to get on TV or whatever, you're putting yourself in a situation. It's like going to a beach, and if there's a sign there on the beach says shark infested waters, don't swim here,
And then you jump in.
and you jump in, well,
Right.
whose fault is that?
Exactly.
So
Exactly.
if you're going into these types of things and you're bypassing that inner voice or that feeling or whatever that God would give you,
Right.
then it's nobody's fault but your own that you've placed yourself into that. But the bad thing and the sad thing is that not only will that person be in jeopardy and could really be overcome by demonic forces, but everybody that is connected to that person and their family, friends, whatever it may be, they can all be in jeopardy as well, because it's like a
100%.
spiritual virus and it can affect everybody. And so this is why I caution people not to do it. It's not, and for the stuff that I do, if there were ever the disclaimer, don't try this at home,
Right.
it would be for this, because it's life-threatening.
Right.
And it's only by the power of God that I can do what I do, because it's Him and He and His power that is working through me. It's not me. And so I've seen people, though, Angela, that try to emulate and go out there and then it ends up disastrous for them.
Oh yeah, and for the family they're trying to help too. If they're
Correct.
they're not skilled or they're not strong in their faith or prepared, because my saying was everybody wants to go chase demons until they find them.
Right, until they find them, and then what? And I've
Right.
had cases that I've performed these exorcisms, spiritual deliverances over people, and then we sit down and we put a game plan together, and then I'm not done yet. I have to get up, I have to go through the entire home to make sure that there's nothing evil hiding or lurking there.
Right.
And on several occasions, I have encountered evil entities that were hiding and lurking. And on one occasion was in 2014, in a home, very large home. The client was fully possessed. God had worked through me to have delivered her. And after everything was over with, I'm going through this very large home. Started in the basement, clearing everything. I have to bind and rebuke it, cast out.
Right.
I have to anoint the home. And I will say, I declare this room, this space, and every single thing by the mighty power of Yahweh and His mighty and holy name. In Yahshua Jesus' name, I declare this space and every single thing in it to be blood sealed, sanctified, purified, cleansed, and made holy before the Most High God. Peace is here and peace shall remain forevermore. Glory, hallelujah, Selah. So I have to go from one room to the other,
And each time
doing this and anointing, right? And on this occasion, got everything done, and then I got to the high level. It was a third floor. It had a wide set of steps. It was like an attic space, but they
I was going to
were
say like an
converting
attic.
it. Yes, they were converting it into a master bedroom. So I go up the steps. There is a light on to my right. A little lamp was on over there. I went to that side first, cleared that, and then the other side was completely dark, except for moonlight coming in through this window. So it was like this double window that had the moonlight coming in, no draperies or anything like that.
Sounds like a horror movie right there. Oh my gosh.
Yes, and between that window, from the window, I'd say probably 10 feet over, maybe 12, there was a ventilation shaft. And so between the window and the ventilation shaft, in this beam of the moonlight,
Ooh.
as I'm advancing over towards that side, I come within 6 to 10 feet of this black hooded entity with glowing red eyes that looked like it had wings folded in. They were coming up the points past the shoulder.
It had wings? Oh.
Yeah. And I think this was like, some would say it was a Mothman. I think it was a fallen angel. And,
that's
and
even
so,
scarier to me than a Mothman.
so I want you to think about that for a second. How is it possible that me as a human being, flesh and blood man, can withstand and be in the presence, of course, that had happened for me since childhood and really
Right.
in looking back on it, I couldn't be where I'm at now and helping others had I not been there to suffer and experience those things. But,
For sure.
here I am again as this spiritual warrior standing within 6 to 10 feet of this entity that was well over 7 feet tall.
Oh, wow.
Black hooded entity with glowing red eyes. And so I had, I think I had the Bible in this hand and I had my holy mixture in this hand.
Mm-hmm.
And now think about this, Angela. Some people would faint. Some people
Right.
would probably soil themselves, run, anything.
Right.
I mean, and
Or
I
some
can
people
understand all
the
of it. Yeah, I can understand it
at
all.
once.
But it's by the power of God that I was able to stand there and face it, face to
have to.
face, and withstand it. And I said, by the mighty power of Yahweh in his mighty and holy name, in Yahshua Jesus the Christ's name, I bind and rebuke you and cast you out and command you to depart at once. And I shook that thing
Whoa.
3 times, and that thing let out a screech like
Ooh.
I have never heard before or since. It was so loud it rattled all the
Man.
windows in the house before it departed.
What? Oh my gosh. That's why
So-
I said again, you're a spiritual warrior, because other people would be doing all those things you listed earlier, soiling themselves, running,
Yeah.
passing out, or
And
all
I
these
could
other-
understand all of it, believe me, but it is by the power of God that I can do these things. So you would
Right.
never, I've given over 2,500 media interviews in my career. You could go and listen to every one of them, and you would never, ever hear me one time say that I'm great, that I'm special, I'm this, I'm that. I always give the praise and thanks and glory to God, and that's where it belongs.
Right. But I think you're great and special because you're gifted and able to do this and have strength in your faith, and it's not easy to be strong in your faith, but after everything you've seen, how can you not believe in your heart and know what you're meant to do? Because those people would have been stuck with that entity or went through more angst and more pain and more suffering. So, thank God that you were there and you were meticulous.
Well, I appreciate it, Angela. And again, this was all part of God's plan. And I think,
Sure.
really looking at the bigger picture, I truly believe that before I came into this world, that God had put that calling on my life. I was predestined for that. And the reason I say that is
Sure.
because when I came into the world, some bizarre things happened to me as a child. The first thing, and I talk about this in my latest book, My Life, Transformation from Victim to Victor.
Right.
When I was a baby, the story goes, and I never did believe this story. And again, there's nobody to verify it. My parents are long gone, and most of my family members are. But the story is that when I was a newborn, a hair from a nurse wrapped around one of my toes, and the toe was severed. Now I find that hard to believe, but the toe was. And I have a scar to this day. I'm going to be
So you've got
58
evidence.
years old soon. I've got a scar that wraps around that toe to this day that the toe was severed. But I just
Wow.
don't believe that story about a hair wrapping around the toe to sever. I just don't believe it.
Right.
Oh
my
and
goodness.
then another terrible thing that happened was at age 2. Now it's weird. I don't remember the event, but yet at the same time, I have almost like a flashback of family members, of blood covering me and family members wrapping my head with towels. And they
Oh,
said
no.
that I was somehow circling or dancing around this pole and something impaled my head on the pole and ripped it open, and it was a severe wound. And they were wrapping towel after towel around my head as they rushed me to the hospital. So that's a clear indication that perhaps there were sinister forces at work to try and destroy me before I could get to that position to where I am now, to where God
Right.
wanted and needed me to be as this spiritual warrior. So
Wow.
from a child throughout even into teen years, into my adult years, I have been in many, many life-threatening situations, and God has saved me every single time. Another bizarre thing happened to me. I would say it was probably, I want to say maybe around age 6 or 7. My dad had this utility truck, and it had all these compartments on it. And for some reason, I was compelled to go open one of the compartments and crawl in there to see if I could fit in there. And then my little brother, my younger brother, which I think he's 2.5 years younger than I, he shut that door.
Oh, no.
And then walked away. He shut the door, and I couldn't breathe. I felt like I was suffocating, and I was screaming out for God and for Jesus to help me.
Right.
And that was a miracle, because the next door neighbor, it was a family that lived there. It was a family by the name of Irvin. They lived there, and the oldest son, Gordon Irvin, had walked out of his house at the moment I'm screaming for God to save me.
Right.
He walks out and he heard me, and he came and opened that door. I could have died in there because there was nothing, I was suffocating, and he opened that door and saved my life that day. But many, many bizarre, you just wouldn't believe it. We'd spend the whole show with me telling you about these different life-threatening situations. I once fell 50 feet. Whoa. And fell into about 6 inches of road salt. That's not good. No, because on the way down, I ran into a big aluminum ladder that was on the inside of this structure that I bounced off of. My whole side was bruised from my shoulder all the way down. Terrible. And I landed on my backside in this road salt. And, I'm laying there, and these guys are running down, telling me to stay down.
Right.
Within 15 minutes, I got back up. And not only did I get back up, I went back up there and went to work. Now, that's incredible. I know people that fell 15 feet to their death. And I fell 50 feet. So God has saved me each and every time that I have been in a life-threatening situation. I've written about these things, given accounts of it in my books, and I'm so grateful and thankful to God. And it is a clear indicator to me that the devil would love nothing more than for me to be out of this world and not in this position. And God saves me every time, and I thank him and praise him for it.
Well, we are thankful that you're here. And I think, honestly, that our fans would love to hear more. So I think we're going to schedule a part 2 with you, and maybe even have some questions from people that they've always wanted to know, since you have so much experience that they get this opportunity to ask you questions. And I have more questions too. It's not just them, me too. I'll admit it's me as well. So I think we're going to wrap up, and I think we would love to have you come back. Will you come back for a part 2?
Of course. Probably end up being a part 3 because there's so much. I mean, it's unfathomable, Angela, when you really, it's like an onion. You peel layer after layer after layer off, and 100%. It's just the story just continues to unfold. So, yeah, we have so much more to talk about. I want to thank you for having me. It's really been a pleasure
for being here.
To have been on with you. So we're off to a good start here, and we'll have a part 2. And
part 2, part 3, maybe a whole long series. We'll just keep going. We very well
may, because the information continues to this day, and the experiences as well. Now, most of my experiences currently are divine experiences. The only negative experiences would be when I'm engaged in spiritual warfare, binding and rebuking and casting out, and I might encounter something evil along the way, and I'm evicting it by the power of God working through me. But I've had so many divine experiences as well, actual interactions with angels and divine things happening. So we have a lot to cover, a lot more to cover in these coming interviews.
Well, that is exciting. Bill, I really appreciate everything. I can't wait that we continue this series on, and I know you've got so much to do and so many people to help, and hopefully by airing this that you can help more and more people, because it's a battle out there, and you got to fight on the side of right and the side of light. So I'm glad that you're a spiritual warrior here with us.
And Angela, again, thank you very much for having me, and thank all of you out there for tuning in. And if you're out there and you're in need, don't hesitate to contact me. Yes, I'm always very busy, but God always helps me to be able to manage. And I promise you that if you contact me, my website is www.billjbean.com. Go to the site. You can contact me directly from the site. I promise you I'll get back to you as quickly as I possibly can, and I'll get you scheduled as quick as possible as well.
Yes. So if you are in need, or you feel that any of this pertains to you, or you need some spiritual help along the way, contact Bill Bean, and we're going to come back for a part 2. So don't forget to like and share and subscribe. And if you have any questions you want to ask for our second or third session, or who knows, we may get to 6 of them. But if you have any of those, be sure to drop them in the comments as well. Thank you again so much for being here, and I am looking forward to our next session.
Me as well, Angela. God bless you and your family and everybody out there, and looking forward to the next one.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.